The antiseptic smell of the hospital hit me as soon as I stepped off the elevator, bringing back memories I'd spent 2 decades trying to forget. The last time I'd been in a hospital, I was 18 and terrified, clutching my best friend's hand as I brought my daughter into the world. Alone. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I made my way down the corridor, following the room numbers until I reached 412. Through the window, I could see her, Eleanor Matthews, my mother, looking far smaller than I remembered in the hospital bed. My name is Sarah Collins, and 20 years ago, my mother threw me out of our house for refusing to get an abortion. Now she needed me, and part of me wanted to walk away just like she had. But I'm not her. I never was. Sarah. A familiar voice made me turn. My younger sister Rebecca stood there, clutching a coffee cup, her perfectly highlighted hair and designer clothes a stark contrast to the sterile hospital surroundings. You actually came. You said it was urgent, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. That she's dying. Rebecca nodded, glancing through the window at our mother. Her kidneys are failing. She needs a transplant, and she hesitated. You're the only match in the family. Of course I was. Life had a twisted sense of humor that way. Does she know I'm here? Yes. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. She's been asking for you, actually, ever since she found out about the match. I bet she has, I thought bitterly. 20 years of silence, and now suddenly she wanted to talk, because she needed something from me. Again. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped into the room. The beeping of monitors filled the silence as my mother turned her head to look at me. Her hair, once a matching shade of dark brown to mine, was now completely gray. Her face, lined with age and illness, showed a flicker of something. Recognition? Regret? I couldn't tell. Sarah, she said, her voice weaker than I remembered. You came. I did. I remained standing near the door, maintaining my distance. Rebecca said you needed to see me. She tried to sit up straighter, wincing at the movement. I know it's been a long time. 20 years, I said flatly, since the night you threw me out for ruining your perfect family image. The memory of that night floated back, sharp and clear despite the passing decades. I'd been terrified to tell her about the pregnancy, but I'd hoped foolishly that my mother would support me. Instead, she'd exploded. No daughter of mine is going to be a teenage mother, she'd screamed, throwing my hastily packed bags onto the front lawn. Either fix this mistake or don't come back at all. I'd chosen my baby. I'd never regretted that choice, not even during those first brutal months when I was sleeping on my best friend Jenny's couch, working 2 jobs while trying to finish high school online. Sarah, my mother's voice pulled me back to the present. I know I handled things badly. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Badly? You threw your pregnant teenage daughter out into the street. You didn't even ask if I was okay, if I needed help. You just erased me. I was trying to protect our family's reputation. No, I cut her off. You were protecting your reputation. Your standing in the community. Your perfect image as head of the PTA and church committee. It was always about you. She fell silent, her hands fidgeting with a hospital blanket. Rebecca, who'd followed me into the room, cleared her throat awkwardly. Sarah, please, she said softly. Mom needs a kidney. I finished for her. That's why I'm here, isn't it? Because suddenly you need something from the daughter you threw away. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Once, those tears would have devastated me, made me rush to apologize and make things right. But I wasn't that desperate to please teenager anymore. I made mistakes, she whispered. Terrible mistakes. But I'm your mother. Are you? I asked quietly, because a mother doesn't abandon her child when they need her most. A mother doesn't choose reputation over love. I thought about my own daughter, Emma, now 19 and thriving in her 2nd year of college. We'd had our struggles. Raising a child while barely more than a child myself wasn't easy, but I'd never made her feel unwanted, never made her feel like she had to earn my love. What do you want from me? My mother asked, her voice small. The truth, I said. For once in your life, tell me the truth. Not what you think people want to hear, not what maintains your image. The truth. She looked away, staring out the window at the gray October sky. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, she spoke. I was scared. I waited, saying nothing. When you told me you were pregnant, all I could think about was my own mother, how she'd been a teenage mother, how she'd struggled and suffered and died young, leaving me alone. Her hands twisted in the blanket. I was terrified you'd end up the same way. So you made sure I was alone yourself. The words came out sharper than I intended. I thought if I was harsh enough, you'd change your mind. Choose a different path. She let out a shaky breath. By the time I realized what I'd done, how badly I'd failed you, it seemed too late. It wasn't too late, I said, my voice tight with suppressed emotion. You knew where I was. Jenny's parents took me in. Let me stay with them until I finished high school. You drove past their house every day on your way to work. You saw my car in their driveway. I know. A tear slid down her cheek. I saw you sometimes, getting bigger as the pregnancy progressed. I wanted to stop, to apologize, but your pride was more important, I finished for her. She didn't deny it. Rebecca, who'd been silent during this exchange, stepped forward. Sarah, please, whatever happened in the past. Mom needs help now. The doctors say without a transplant. I held up a hand to stop her. I know what happens without a transplant. I also know that agreeing to be a donor is a major decision, one that requires extensive physical and psychological evaluation. It's not something I can decide standing here in this hospital room. My mother's face fell, but she nodded slowly. I understand. I don't deserve your help. I know that. But would you at least tell me about my grandchild? Just once before. I studied her face, looking for any sign of manipulation, but all I saw was genuine longing and perhaps regret. Her name is Emma, I said finally. She's 19, studying environmental science at Berkeley. She's brilliant, compassionate, and stronger than I ever was. 19, my mother whispered. The same age I was when I had you. The irony wasn't lost on me. But unlike her, I'd made different choices when faced with a teenage daughter. I'd chosen love over judgment, support over rejection. I need time, I said, stepping back toward the door. Time to think about everything. About what you're asking. Of course, she said quickly. Whatever you need. Just, will you come back? Even if you decide not to. I paused at the door, thinking about Emma, about the lessons I'd taught her about forgiveness and compassion, about how sometimes the hardest choices aren't between right and wrong, but between different kinds of right. I'll come back, I said quietly, but not because you're my mother, because I'm not the kind of person who walks away when someone needs help, even if they once walked away from me. As I left the hospital, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. How did it go with Grandma? Are you okay? I smiled slightly, remembering her reaction when I told her about my mother's request. Unlike me at her age, Emma had grown up knowing she was loved unconditionally. It gave her the strength to be compassionate, even toward those who might not deserve it. I'm okay, I typed back. It's complicated. Can we talk tonight? Of course, Mom. Love you. 3 simple words that meant everything. 3 words my mother had never said to me after that night 20 years ago. I got into my car, but didn't start it immediately. Instead, I sat there, thinking about choices and consequences, about patterns repeating across generations, and about the power we have to break those patterns. My mother had chosen pride over love. I had chosen my daughter over everything else. Now I had another choice to make, and this time, lives hung in the balance. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen, staring at old photographs spread across the table. Jenny had dropped them off last night after hearing about my hospital visit, pictures she'd kept from those difficult early days after my mother threw me out. There I was, 17, and terrified, my baby bump just starting to show. Another of me studying for finals on Jenny's couch, textbooks balanced on my growing belly. The day Emma was born, my face exhausted but radiant as I held my daughter for the first time. My mother wasn't in any of them. She'd missed it all. My phone buzzed. Rebecca again. She'd been texting constantly since yesterday, alternating between guilt trips and pleas for understanding. Mom's numbers are getting worse. This one read. The doctors say we need to make a decision soon. I set the phone down without responding, picking up another photograph instead. This one was more recent. Emma's high school graduation. She stood between me and Jenny, all of us laughing at something off camera. My daughter had grown up surrounded by love, even if it wasn't the conventional family structure my mother had valued so highly. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Jenny's familiar car in the driveway. I brought coffee and bagels, she announced as I opened the door. Figured you could use some moral support. 20 years later, and she was still taking care of me. Some friendships go beyond friendship, they become family. Have you decided? She asked, setting the food down and studying my face. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to walk away, to let her face the consequences of her choices like she made me face mine. Jenny nodded, understanding in her eyes. She'd been there through everything. The nights I cried myself to sleep, the struggle of juggling school and work while pregnant, the moment I finally held Emma in my arms. But, she prompted gently. But I keep thinking about Emma, I said softly, about how I've always taught her that forgiveness isn't about whether someone deserves it. It's about who we choose to be. And who do you choose to be, Sarah? That was the question, wasn't it? The one I've been wrestling with since leaving the hospital yesterday. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Rebecca. It was Dr. Martinez, the transplant coordinator I'd spoken with last night. Ms. Collins, we've reviewed your mother's case. If you're interested in being evaluated as a donor, we should start the process soon. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly. I closed my eyes, thinking about choices and consequences. About the night my mother had thrown me out, and all the nights after when I promised myself I'd never be that kind of parent. I'll do the evaluation, I heard myself say. But I have conditions. An hour later, I walked back into my mother's hospital room. She looked worse than yesterday, her skin taking on a yellowish tinge that spoke of advancing kidney failure. Sarah, she breathed, hope flickering across her face. You came back. I did, I said, sitting in the chair beside her bed. And I've agreed to be evaluated as a donor. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you, I'm not finished, I cut her off firmly. I have conditions. First, if I'm approved as a donor, you need to go to therapy. Real therapy, not just the church counseling you believe in. You need to deal with your own trauma about your mother instead of passing it on. She flinched but nodded. Second, I continued, if you want a relationship with Emma, and that's her choice, not yours or mine, you accept her exactly as she is. No judgment, no attempts to mold her into your idea of perfect. Of course, she whispered, anything. And finally, I met her eyes steadily. You need to understand that this doesn't fix everything. A kidney doesn't erase 20 years of absence. If you want to be part of our lives, you have to earn it. Every day. Can you do that? She was quiet for a long moment, really looking at me perhaps for the first time since I'd returned. You're not the same girl I threw out, she said finally. No, I agreed. I'm not. That girl died the night you chose your reputation over your daughter. The woman I am now, she's stronger, wiser, and a much better mother than you ever were. Harsh words, maybe, but true ones. Sometimes healing can only begin with truth. I'd like to try, she said softly, to be better, to do better, if you'll give me the chance. The next few weeks were a blur of medical tests, psychological evaluations, and endless paperwork. Emma came home from college to support me through the process, her presence a constant reminder of why I was doing this. You're amazing, Mom, she told me one night as we sat on the porch swing. I don't know if I could be this forgiving. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, remembering how tiny she'd once been. You could be. Because I raised you to be stronger than hate, bigger than bitterness. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't holding on to anger, it's letting it go. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday in November. As they wheeled me into the operating room, I thought about cycles and how we choose to break them. My grandmother had been a teenage mother who died young, leaving my mother alone and traumatized. My mother had responded to my pregnancy by choosing abandonment over support. But I had chosen differently. I had chosen to keep my baby, to build a life filled with love instead of judgment. And now I was choosing to give my mother a second chance, not because she deserved it, but because I refused to let her mistakes define who I was. 3 months after the successful transplant, we sat in my therapist's office, part of the healing process we'd both committed to. It wasn't easy. 20 years of pain and resentment don't disappear with a surgery or a few apologies. I look at Emma, my mother said during one session, and I see everything I should have done differently. She's so confident, so secure in your love. I robbed you of that security, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Yes, I agreed, you will. But regret can either paralyze us or motivate us to do better. The choice is yours. She was trying. She attended therapy faithfully. worked to understand her own trauma responses, and never once tried to force a relationship with Emma. She waited, patient and humble, until Emma decided she was ready to know her grandmother. A year after the surgery, we celebrated Emma's 20th birthday. 4 generations of women sat around my dining room table: my mother, me, Emma, and Jenny, who was as much family as any of us. The conversation wasn't always easy, and there were moments when old tensions surfaced. But as I watched my mother tentatively sharing stories with Emma, saw the genuine interest in her eyes as Emma talked about her environmental science projects, I realized something important. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't protecting our children from pain. It's showing them how to heal from it. I had given my mother more than a kidney. I had given her a chance to break her own cycle of trauma and fear. Whether she took that chance was up to her, but I knew I had made the right choice. Not because she deserved it, not because it erased the past, but because I had chosen to be the kind of person who helps others heal, even if they once caused me pain. That night, after everyone had gone home, Emma helped me clean up the kitchen. "You know what I admire most about you, Mom?" she said suddenly. "My excellent taste in birthday cakes?" I teased. She smiled but shook her head. "No, the way you taught me that strength isn't about not getting hurt. It's about what you choose to do with the hurt. You could have let what Grandma did make you bitter, make you hard. Instead, you chose to be better." I pulled her into a hug, thinking about choices and consequences, about cycles broken and new patterns formed. "That's the thing about choices, baby," I whispered into her hair. "They show us who we really are. And sometimes they give us the chance to help others become who they could be." My mother and I will never have the relationship we might have had if she'd made different choices 20 years ago. That possibility died the night she threw me out. But we're building something new, something based on truth and accountability rather than appearance and pride. It's not perfect, it's not always easy, but it's real, and sometimes that's enough. Because in the end, life isn't about the family you're born into. It's about the family you choose to build, the love you choose to give, and the person you choose to become. I chose to be more than my mother's mistakes. I chose to give more than I was given. I chose love over bitterness, healing over hate. And in making those choices, I gave my daughter something my mother never gave me: the knowledge that love doesn't have to be earned, that family should be a safe harbor rather than a storm to weather, and that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is choose forgiveness, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.